If you were to look at a list of the greatest prime ministers in Canadian history, and you look at sixth place, you'll see an unheard of name in the midst of famous prime ministers. Heck, I've got this guy in fourth in my own tier list. His name is Louis Saint Laurent, but who the heck is Louis Saint Laurent? Louis Saint Laurent was born on the 1st of February in 1882 in Compton, Quebec, a village in the eastern township, to John Baptiste Moise Saint Laurent and Mary Ann Broderick. Compton used to be a heavily English-speaking town, although it quickly became overtaken by French speakers between 1900 and 1911. Saint Laurent grew up being bilingual, becoming the first prime minister since Robert Borden to be bilingual. This was because his father only spoke French and his mother English. However, as an Irish immigrant, his mother spoke English with a heavily Irish accent, so Louis did pick up an Irish accent. Louis's dad was a shoekeeper and a staunch supporter of the Liberal Party, and Prime Minister Laurier, of course. His father unsuccessfully ran for a seat in the by-election in 1896, and when Laurier led the Liberals to their second win in their history, 14-year-old Louis relayed the election returns from the telephone in his father's shop. Saint Laurent received degrees from Séminaire Saint-Charles-Beaumaris, bachelor's in 1902, and Université Laval and got his law degree in 1905. He was offered, but declined, a Rhodes Scholarship upon his graduation from Laval in 1905, and in 1908, he married Jeanne Renault. Louis Saint Laurent worked as a lawyer between 1905 and 1942. He also became a professor of law at Université Laval in 1914. Saint Laurent practiced corporate, commercial, and constitutional law in Quebec and became one of the country's most respected lawyers. He also served as the president of the Canadian Bar Association from 1930 up until 1932. In 1907, Saint Laurent gained some attention in Quebec after he made a move that was viewed unusual at the time. He put a priest and nuns on the witness stand and cross-examined them. This occurred during his engagement in a case consisting the will of a woman who had left everything she owned to her parish priest. In 1912, Saint Laurent won a case against Canadian Pacific, and in 1913 he was one of the defending counsel for Henry Kendall Thaw, who was seeking to avoid extradition from Quebec. In 1923, Saint Laurent opened up his own law office. In 1926, in a test case before the Supreme Court, Saint Laurent argued for religious minority, which is non-Christian at this time, rights. He was in favor of Jewish demand for representation on Montreal's Protestant Board of School Commissioners. He also supported a separate Jewish system of schools. Though Saint Laurent's bid to have Jewish representation in the school board was unsuccessful, the province of Quebec recognized the right to establish separate schools for non-Christians. Though an ardent liberal, Louis remained aloof from active politics, much preferring to be a lawyer in Quebec. In fact, he was such a great lawyer that twice he had to turn down seats to the Supreme Court. It was not until that he was nearly 60 that Louis had finally agreed to join politics, when the Liberal leader, William Lyon Mackenzie King, was Prime Minister. King's lieutenant in Quebec had died, and he believed that the new lieutenant should be a strong and respected leader. King recruited Saint Laurent to his cabinet as Minister of Justice. In February 1942, he won a by-election for Quebec East. Saint Laurent supported King's decision to introduce conscription in 1944. His support prevented more than a handful of Quebec Liberal members of Parliament from leaving the party, and was therefore crucial to keeping the government and the party united. Saint Laurent was King's right-hand man. Saint Laurent represented Canada at the 1945 San Francisco Conference that led to the founding of the United Nations. In September 1945, Soviet cipher clerk Igor Gaushenko unexpectedly arrived at Saint Laurent's office, with evidence of a Soviet spy ring operating in Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom, known as the Gaushenko Affair. The revelations and subsequent investigations over the following few years showed major Soviet espionage in North America. King came to regard Saint Laurent as his most trusted minister and his natural successor. He persuaded Saint Laurent to stick around in government following the war and promoted him to Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, a title King had always kept for himself. In January 1947, Saint Laurent gave a speech at the University of Toronto talking about how Canada needs to be independent from Britain and that the UK needs to accept Canada's willingness for independence. And in 1948, William I. Mackenzie King retired and persuaded his ministers to support Louis Saint Laurent, who easily won the convention and thus the prime ministership. Saint Laurent, compelled by his belief that the United States would be ineffective in times of war, advocated for the use of the United Nations military force. So as Prime Minister, Saint Laurent created the United Nations military and helped end the Suez Crisis. He finalized the annexation of Newfoundland and Labrador, established the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, sent troops to Korea to fight in the Korean War, dramatically increased immigration in a time where there was a lacking economy. His government engaged in the building of the Trans-Canada Railway, the Saint Laurent Seaway, and the Trans-Canada Pipeline. He also did not silence the communists in Canada after it was a growing threat. However, in 1954, Saint Laurent took a 42-day-long tour around the world, citing his desire to get a better picture of what he said the problems which all of us have to face together. He visited 12 countries in total, including France, Germany, Japan, India, and Pakistan. When he returned to Canada, Saint Laurent's personality and character appeared to slightly change. Cabinet ministers noticed he showed signs of fatigue and indifference. Some even claimed he started to feel depressed. 3 years later, 75-year-old Saint Laurent lost the election of 1957 to 62-year-old progressive conservative John Diefenbaker only by 7 seats. 10 years after becoming prime minister, he resigned as leader and handed it over to his Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Lester B. Pearson. Saint Laurent preferred law over politics. Saint Laurent admitted that it took a while to resume his good mood after a sudden and very close electoral loss. After his political retirement, he returned to practicing law and living quietly and privately with his family. During his retirement, he was called into the public spotlight one final time in 1967 to be made a Companion of the Order of Canada, a newly created award. Louis Saint Laurent died from heart failure on July 25, 1973, in Quebec City, aged 91, and he was buried at St. Thomas d'Aquin Cemetery in his hometown of Compton, Quebec. There you go. Now you know about our 11th Prime Minister, Louis Saint Laurent. In my opinion, he is, according to my tier list at least, the 4th best. I would probably have that changed now, but I do still think that he is a great leader and a great Prime Minister. And it's unfortunate that most Canadians haven't even heard of him. He totally deserves to be recognized as a hero and definitely as one of the better prime ministers, especially since we've had some pretty bad ones.